Hey, I'm Dave. Welcome to my shop. Today in Dave's Garage, we're going to take a look at the RGB monstrosity I just built here. It's a Ryzen 3970, 128 gigs of RAM, 3 PCI 4 SSDs in RAID 0. Only the best. And I topped it off with the cheapest RGB fans I could find on Amazon. And they're actually great, except for one problem. And I'll tell you what that problem is. And I'll use this crazy tool to diagnose it and demonstrate it. Do you know what this is? You'll find out coming right up. The irony is, I don't even own an RGB PC, at least not before this one. My last PC build was something like 7 years ago, and that kind of predates any of the RGB fad. I hadn't really planned on doing any RGB whatsoever. In fact, this was supposed to go in a rack. It was supposed to go in the server room, but it turned out that the motherboard I was using was too big to fit in any of the cases I could find that would fit in my rack, and so I wound up putting it in a tower case, even though it will still reside in the server room. Once I had decided to put it in the server room, that allowed for two concessions. It meant that it can be loud in terms of fans, or at least reasonably loud. It can't be outrageous because I can still hear it through the door otherwise, but it can be something louder than what you would want on your desk or near your desk. So I did both. It's got a lot of airflow, and it's got a lot of lights. In fact, it's running at full bore behind me right now, and the microphone is pointed in that general direction. You might be able to hear it in the background, but it's by no means loud. I didn't feel compelled to turn anything off to record this video, so... And then again, it would be a pretty boring video with the machine turned off. So, on a bit of a lark, I decided to go on Amazon.com and look for some high-quality fans that still had RGB output. And I wanted addressable RGB. I should be clear about that. That's what I do as a hobby, is addressable RGB. What do I mean by that? Well, let's have a look at my shop. Not convinced? Well, let's have a look at my backyard. And there's my fire windows. And of course, my fire umbrella. And about 100 other projects like that. And yet, they all have one thing in common. None of them face the street. None of them are visible. Similarly, I really didn't want a RGB monstrosity in my office. But once it was going in the server room, hey, all bets are off. So, onto Amazon I went. And I went to look for the cheapest, high-quality, well-reviewed RGB fans that I could find. Because you can, of course, spend a lot of money and get a quality Corsair fan, something like that, in a 120. I don't know what they cost, but they're not giving those things away. They're pretty proud of them. This case actually supports 10 120mm fans, so I didn't want a fan that cost me $50 a fan or something silly. These absolutely fit the bill. They're well reviewed, 4.5 stars from a couple hundred different reviewers, and not all the seemingly suspicious canned response. It looked like a pretty fair sampling of reviews, and the reviews were good. They were cheap, they're under $30 for a set of 3, and that includes the controller, which can run up to 10 fans, and the 3 fans, and a remote control. So I needed 10 fans. The only thing is they sell them in lots of 3 with a controller that controls 10. So I ordered 4 sets of 3. Once I had them on hand and started the PC build, I could see that there was one space where I really didn't want to put a fan because it would be behind some cabling and shining light through cabling didn't really make any sense. So I left that black. That's on the very bottom, if you can see on the back here. Below these 2 vertical fans, there's room for a third one below that. So it turned out, hey, you only need 9, which is an even multiple of 3 boxes. I could just return the other box, but they're cheap enough I can keep them on hand. It also means I have a handy dandy new in the box set that I can unbox and we can take a look at. Before I do the little unboxing and so on, let's have a look at the fans and what they actually do. Now, this is the remote control that comes with it. As you can see, there's various controls for the different colors, a couple music modes, fan control, we'll talk specifically about that later. Lighting control, brightness, mode, and importantly, a button labeled MB, which is motherboard. So the fans have an input that can take the output from the addressable RGB control of a board like a Gigabyte board and display whatever the motherboard is commanding it to display. And if I do that in this case, I have my board set to color cycle. So it will simply color cycle all the fans. So color cycling is nice, but what about the other 7,000 modes the thing probably has? And yeah, it does. I kick this into a couple DIY program modes. For example, now it's ignoring what the motherboard is commanding, and it's actually running off the little controller box that we'll see later. It's hidden away inside the PC, and all the fans are connected to it. It also powers the fans, so it doesn't add a lot of extra complexity of wiring. Other than the fact that you've got 10 fans, and now you've got 10 cables snaking through to the control box, it's better than having separate power and signal and light and everything else that you could imagine having. So in addition to this red spin mode, there is unicorn rainbow puke mode. If you find a mode that you like, since it would be tough to get back to it with that many modes, there's a DIY list, which should really be favorite instead of do it yourself, but that's what they chose to call it. Simply hit the Add DIY button, and it will add it to the effects that can be cycled through with the DIY button. This allows you to keep a set of, say, 5 or 6 favorites that you can just walk through with a single button. Pretty handy. Otherwise, you can imagine you'd probably do this set and forget it, because stepping through a couple hundred effects is going to be pretty annoying every time you want to try and find the one you liked. It also has a set of 3 music modes. Let's take a quick look at those now. I'd like to write some code using the Gigabyte RGB Fusion SDK in order to drive the outputs on the motherboard to control the individually addressable LEDs. And if I'm able to do that, it'll be nice because the fans support that as the input. So I just simply set it to motherboard and they'll show whatever I generate in terms of a color signal. So I could do flame effects on the fans, things like that. Or if you wanted to be even fancier, you could do it based on color. You could start out ice cold blue like this, and as the machine warmed up, have it progress all the way through to fire red. So let's see what comes in the box. What do you get for your $30 or less? I'm guessing this looks a lot like a retail fan from some other company that I'm not aware of, and that magically, somewhere in China, it got duplicated, perhaps without permission. Because it looks like a pretty high-end unit to be, under 10 bucks. I can't speak to the longevity. I assume it's a hydraulic bearing. Now, it does say the lifespan here is 20,000 hours, and I'm no mathematician, but let's say there's 20 hours in a day that your PC is on for some reason. Then that's 1,000 days. That's like less than 3 years. So that's a little worrisome. I don't care if one fan fails here and there, because with 9 or 10 of them, kind of plus the power supply action, it'll be okay. 10 out of 10 that I've seen, or 9 out of 9 anyway, have worked perfectly. So the worst case I've seen is a little light bulb being off center a little bit. So 2 things I'd like to test are the amount of airflow, or the static and dynamic pressure, and the actual fan speed. So to measure the fan air pressure, we're going to use a Galilean thermometer. We'll connect a rubber hose from the input port here to the discharge of the fan and measure the drop using the reading on the blue scale. 33 CFM. This has lasers, and it has a counter scale, and it will count the number of times that its laser is reflected back towards itself per second. We simply point it at the fan, measure the number of times that the fan blades go by, divide by the number of fan blades per fan, and that gives us the RPM. So let's measure the fans and see what they're actually spinning at. And here's the only problem with the fans. Using the laser tachometer, I was able to confirm that going through each of the 4 speed steps, it stays at 1200 RPM. It's a good speed to be stuck at, but it'd be nice to be adjustable. So in addition, you obviously get 2 more fans. You get the fan controller box. So the controller supports 10 fans. It only comes with 3, but if you buy multiple sets, you can throw the extra controllers away or make use of them somehow. But you don't need them. You simply plug the extra fans into this and it will drive up to 10 at once. Now, there is a risk there. even with just running what fans you have off a single controller. If this goes bad, all your fans stop. It's one thing to have your lighting stop, but it's another thing to have all of your fans stop. So one obvious solution would be to use 2 of them, or even 3 of them, and then split your fan load across multiple controller boxes. And you would simply have to power them each separately and wire half of your fans to one and half of your fans to the other. That way, if one dies, you've still got at least half your airflow, and hopefully that's enough to keep your PC from catching fire, or shutting down, or going into thermal load, or whatever they do when they get too hot. The control box is powered by a SATA connector, which is nice because it means you don't need a Molex connector, so you don't have any of the red and yellow ketchup and mustard connectors in your PC unless you have some other need for it. What else do we get? We get thermal control, a bunch of screws to hold the fans in, and an instruction sheet. Tells you very little. So do they cool? Yeah, they actually cool my system really well. It keeps everything really well in check. And now granted, I do have 9 of them in a Leon Lee case, but it is a pretty good heat generator. It's a 3970 with 2 GPUs in there, and I'm running things like Boink and Folding at Home in order to do maximal stress. I am a little worried about the controller box and how robust that is and whether it's going to burn out and stop all my fans. But as we discussed, there are measures you can take to protect yourself against that. And I've had no indication from the thing that it's going to be anything other than reliable because everything has worked pretty much perfectly so far. Unless the LEDs and the fans are sharing ground or power, there's only 6 wires on the connector going to each fan. And so you need 3 of those for the LEDs. If you have a PWM fan, you also have a tachometer line coming back to tell the system how fast the fan is actually going. And so such fans are usually 4. So you would then need 4 plus 3 is 7 wires if these were PWM fans. Speaking of the box, it does say fan speed could be adjusted between 0 and 1200 RPM. Now, it does say between, but no. Fan size 120 by 120, weight 150 grams times 3 fans. Fan speed 0 to 1200. Well, based on measurements, 1200 or 0. The noise is 23.5 dBA, but I don't know a lot about acoustics, but I'm going to guess that's kind of a useless measurement unless you know the distance at which it was taken. So unless there's a standard that I don't know about, I don't know what 23.5 dBA actually tells you. 33 CFM. Ask me how. Oh, earlier you wanted to know how I got the 33 CFM? Yeah, off the box. Current, 1/3 of an amp. It takes 12 and 5 volts. Probably 12 for the fans, 5 for the LEDs. Rated power is 4.2 watts. The Amazon affiliate links for the fans are down in the description. Thanks for watching, and people ask, why the blue glove? Well, look at your thumbs up icon. Is it gray or is it blue? If it's gray, click on it. Change it blue. I'm just in it for the subs and likes, so humor me and give it a shot either way. Do thumbs up, thumbs down. Let me know if you like this one or not. I get a lot of people comment that they're surprised the channel is not bigger. Well, you can help. Let a friend know. Forward it on. It's kind of a techie thing, so not everybody's going to run across it. If you have it yourself, please be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.
Subscribe.